But what are we going to try to do is, given the topic, there's going to be a lot of debate and then there will be no resolution. But perhaps you will have some key takeaways from this one. Because I have done several different panels of these with different central bankers, regulators around the world, and then only one thing is the conclusion, which is let's agree to disagree. And I think that this is what perhaps going to happen, but you will have a lot more insights within the industry. So for a brief intro, I work as a columnist for Forbes magazine. I work as a chief investment officer for an investment firm based in London. I guest lecture at the London School of Economics and at the University of Warwick. I come from a traditional hedge fund background, working as a hedge fund trader for Bank of New York and Bank of America. So I'm going to pass on to our splendid pool of talent. They will introduce themselves and how exactly they are involved, and then we'll take it from there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aviya, and I'm a blockchain regulation expert and the founder of Aviya Law. I'm based in Tel Aviv, and basically I work with crypto startups and also with a lot of investors in the crypto space. And I have, beyond helping them with their legal needs, I have a vision to help the blockchain industry by bridging the gap between institutionalization of the market and between the retail side of it, and helping the regulatory landscape to be more retail friendly and more accommodating towards fintech. So that's me.
Hi, my name is Robert Courtneidge. I was a lawyer for the past 30 years, specializing in payments, working for a number of major law firms around the world. But in the last year, I've decided to retire from law and become CEO of a e-money institution in the UK that's issuing Visa, MasterCard and China Union pay cards and acquiring for them as well. I made the move because I felt that I'd done enough law. It was getting to me in the end. And I wanted to actually deliver some special solutions. I have very special relationships with the schemes because of acting for them as their lawyer for many years. And so my aim is to try and bridge that gap between the sort of crypto space and the real banking space to give us this interregnum position before the cryptocurrencies are ubiquitous. It's going to take quite a few years in my view, and I have some interesting views both on the legal and the regulatory side, as well as the practical implications to businesses.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Yamila Eraso. I am a partner at TLDR Capital. We are a global advisory firm for tokenization projects and their interface with public markets. My background is also as a lawyer. I am a Columbia qualified and New York State qualified attorney, but for the past 4 years I've been practicing out of Berlin, and mostly, like for the past 10 years, working with venture capital, M&A. But in the past 2 years and a half, working with blockchain projects from the regulatory aspect, especially with security token projects.
Hello, my name is Omourtag Petkov. Thank you very much again for all of you staying here. I'm a partner at one of the largest law firms here, working in banking and finance and private equity. We also represent, by the way, traditional payment systems like Visa, MasterCard. I'm also chairman of the British Bulgarian Business Association, which is the British Chamber of Commerce here. We are a media partner of the event, and we are very happy to do that. Thank you again.
So let me start with asking you questions. How many of you have been attending conferences since the start of this year? Just please raise your hands. Pretty much all of you. Okay. What is the trend? What has been the trend and how has it shifted? Say something. Like, do you think that from January to March, what was the trend in the industry? We can easily say that yes, the trend was very much about focus on the utility tokens, right? Because people have been doing a lot of ICOs and coming up with the utility tokens, building up on the momentum from last year. From March to now, it's all about ICOs. So, all about the STOs, not about the, of course, about the ICOs. So, what are your clients are looking at right now? Because if any of you have read any of the columns that we've written, there is only one thing prominent, which is if you have a utility token under certain circumstances, you can agree that you can still have a utility token, but otherwise, none of the hedge funds, none of the institutions would invest.
So I think today we're coming back to sanity. After the insanity of raising funds for air, basically, today we're coming back to sanity, which means that utility tokens with no operative platforms have no viability anymore. So right now my clients and the market as a whole are very much focused on STOs and TAOs, which are tokenized asset offerings. And actually, I'm trying to advocate for now for the term STPOs, which are security tokens private offerings, because that mostly describes what actually is happening. Because of securities laws reality, that right now the only exemptions that actually allow a crypto startup to easily raise funds are mainly private placement regimes. It means that the market is really being privatized and is being directed at qualified investors, institutional investors. So it's not so much as STOs as STPOs. So that's what I'm experiencing most right now.
Omourtag, what is your opinion? What do you see in the market? So the clients are coming with the projects more on the STOs or on the utility tokens?
I would say the utility tokens rather, but you know, in Bulgaria, this the whole market is still at its sort of nascent stage, right? And this is still, and the lack of proper regulation and the lack of understanding from financial institutions and the government is a huge hurdle. It's an obstacle basically to the development of this. So when I say utility tokens, it's still, and in my view in Bulgaria in general, not in our practice specifically, it's sort of a fringe movement rather than a real market, a real business.
So people are coming with you with the utility or with the STO more. Would you say that? Would you agree to that? That people are coming that, okay, look, we are actually going to do an STO now rather than a utility token?
Is that for me?
Well, any both of you.
I still see both. I still see utility tokens and security tokens, but more and more people exploring changing their projects to security tokens. What I see in the market, especially right now, is that it has shifted from entirely trying to build your entire product, whether it's going to be a utility token or a security token, out of scratch with an ICO, but actually to start taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, we maybe might need to build a little bit of capital in a traditional way. So in this year, I see more and more clients coming and saying, we are actually doing a small family and friends or seed round through traditional means to build on our product, or at least a prototype, or to better build the security token that we're gonna issue then to the public. That is giving them a possibility to present something better than just thin air, that I agree that was happening in the years before, to be able to reach out more, to actually start understanding that they need to do some extra efforts to gain the community and build a community beyond just Telegram. And also exploring whether a security token offering is their way to go, and whether it's going to be any sort of asset in this securitized asset or an equity, a tokenized equity.
How would you do that? How would you classify something as an STO, as a security token? What's the definition? How can you do that?
That's a fantastic question, because those definitions are also changed depending on the jurisdiction you are. So most of the projects try to start with the jurisdiction they are incorporated and classifying whether the project is going to be a security token under that jurisdiction. Of course, they are not naive, and I think anyone advising a project should not be naive to say, okay, this is all you have to do, but also thinking what are the definitions of security tokens in the markets you are trying to reach, because the regulation will catch you. The regulatory bodies in these countries that you are also marketing or trying to get your potential investors are also going to apply to you. And even if you try to say that it's only in the country that you are issuing.
How many of you are actually doing an STO right now? One person. Okay. So you're trying to attract clearly an institutional market. That's your focus.
I think the big advantage in private placement regimes is that it's the only way today to launch an STO that is cross-border, because basically, and I'm not going to go into too much details, but
no, I will disagree about the cross-border perspective. You know why? Because if I'm doing an STO and then I have something happening in Liechtenstein, Malta, Gibraltar, try to sell. I said this before on our crypto cruise. Try to sell that to your clients over in the US. They will laugh at your face.
Okay, but let's speak about Europe. Let's say if you're incorporating a company out of Malta, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing a private placement, right? Now, the criteria that you need to adhere to is, the private placement regime according to the prospectus directive in Europe, right? So you're good to go. Now, even if you're trying to sell your token now to investors in Hong Kong or in Singapore, the private placement regimes in Hong Kong, Singapore, exclude the US right now. In US you have the Reg D, which you have to go through, but otherwise, in other countries, you do not have that process, same as the Reg D. So if you're incorporating your company out of Malta, you can sell your securities tokens to qualified investors, accredited investors, institutional across Europe, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, mostly in most part of the world. That's what I mean when I say cross-border. You don't need to go through a regulatory process in each and every jurisdiction where you want to sell your tokens. And that's pretty amazing.
Why would I go to Malta?
No, I just gave Malta as an example.
Okay, let's say
you can have your company based in wherever. Estonia, Lithuania.
I will not go to Lithuania, I will not go to Malta, I will not go to Gibraltar. You know why?
Yeah.
Because none of these countries have anything to say when it comes to the European Central Bank. When their committee happens, it's Germany and France. If these two countries are coming in, I will be very happy. That's good. But I agree, that's the general trend.
Yes, but when you're following a private placement regime, that's what I mean by saying that put taxation aside. I'm not talking tax perspective right now, but when you're going for a private placement, you can incorporate your company in so many places and still sell your tokens to investors in so many places with minimal hassle, right? The problem is that you can only approach qualified institutional investors.
So is there a difference if you have a STO taking place in Singapore and STO taking place in Gibraltar, Malta, which I really don't believe it? Basically,
the difference is mainly in the way they define who a qualified investor is, but which is also very similar across jurisdictions. The net worth can vary a little bit, the annual income criteria can vary a little bit, but basically, if you have someone that's an angel investor, or you have a VC fund, or you have an institution that wants to buy your tokens, you're going to be okay in most parts of the world selling those tokens too.
Isn't this really, I'm just going to say that, I think it's a lot of bullshit, all this stuff, because all the stuff you're talking about now, STOs and that, have got nothing to do with how Bitcoin and all these coins started, which are utility tokens. What you're talking about is a new way of running investments, sort of collective investment schemes, or you're creating a new way of investing in companies. And all that's happened is the institutions have come back and managed to pull it all back to you and saying, well, fuck it, utility tokens, you can't use it.
We're not going to use that word.
That's what I was saying when I was saying that securities laws are forcing the crypto startup market into the VC route, into the institutional market.
I think blockchain is really useful for running corporations and running, it's a new way of doing it. You're going back to Victorian times.
This is the new technology, really? Do you think the blockchain is the new technology? But I don't want it to go there because we have another big thing. I think Dr. Sidhu was sitting here, he's done one of the very respectable person in the industry. So we were talking about how much regulation do we really need. And I sat with Norbini, one of the known as Dr. Doom and Gloom, and an economist a completely pessimistic person, never been married in his entire life, and
That's pretty optimistic to me.
and he thinks blockchain and ICOs are nothing but just a scam, right? So you think that through the payment methods that the banks are doing it, banks are actually funding, earlier of our conversation, the banks are actually funding all that money laundering process. Get the US government involved and you can do that, correct?
No, the point is that the benefit of the original cryptocurrencies was to create financial freedom, which is what this talk's all about. It's about financial freedom against regulation. What we've been talking about, STOs, is where the regulators have managed to push everything back into the old style investments and the old style of corporations and how you just move those to the blockchain, which is all very good, but it's not about financial freedom. Financial freedom is going back to the utility token and how you can transfer money free of anti-money laundering regulations and the like.
I think we need to be courageously pragmatic, which means that right now we need to remember that we still have traditional worlds to play with. We have the traditional banking world, the regulators, and we can't escape them. And if you're a founder or an entrepreneur that thinks you can completely disrupt and not pay any attention to regulations and banks, then, I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, but like really, if we want the market to grow, we need to embrace the infrastructure, not discard it.
I will slightly disagree. We have to play a little bit along, but not embrace it, because that means the infrastructure is not going to change. And one of the fantastic things about this technology is that it's forcing regulators to have a new dialogue and to start thinking new things. Problem is they are too slow. The technology goes too fast. Projects are not going to stop to wait for the regulator. And that's where earlier in our discussion we were thinking, okay, should we have self-regulatory bodies, or should we just play within the regime?
People will start cutting each other's throat if that happens. If there's no regulation in this one, everyone will say that we are Bitcoin Cash, we are the biggest one, we are the Bitcoin, we are the Ethereum, we have the biggest one. Everyone is going to start going into that.
That's mankind.
But at the same time, we live in a community where we have to be regulated. Omourtag, what is your opinion, sir?
In terms of regulation versus financial freedom, and what does it mean, financial freedom in cryptocurrencies? What does it mean, financial freedom, right? Like Robert said, initially this arose and was successful because in its very core, in its very essence, it's about decentralization and independence from governments. And many, if not most, I'm not sure, people in the industry strongly believe that this should be the case.
Free from banks as well, not just governments. Banks control the world.
When I say governments, I mean central banks and financial institutions, basically classic money, if you like. But if cryptocurrencies are to succeed, and they have huge potential, if they are to succeed, they have to become more mainstream. They have to get into the mainstream, meaning get institutional money heavily involved in that. And only this is the only way for people at large to benefit from these technologies, from this innovation. Otherwise, it will remain at the fringe of and it will be independent, probably totally free, but in certain number of years it may even die, and I don't think governments will allow it, by the way. So let's be also realistic. As much as we want freedom and from governments, also independence from banks, and they will not allow it. So
do you think governments would allow STOs?
The who?
Governments would allow STO? Do you think that would be the way forward? Because a lot of family offices, and some of them are actually sitting here, we spoke as well, they are only interested in investing in STOs. Do you think they are confident because the government would be more easy on the STO as in comparison to the utility?
Yes,
Yeah.
it will be, yeah, but, sorry.
I think Bulgaria is actually, like, I hate to say it, but it's not a good example because, like, I understand what you're saying, but Bulgaria is an example for a non-progressive approach taken by governments. On the other hand, you have Estonia, Lithuania, you have countries that are much more digitalized. I mean, in Bulgaria to
digitalize or just trying to make money
No,
by bringing lawyers there and then get the ICOs done?
Listen, you know, I sat in the same panel with the previous Prime Minister of Estonia. He's a 40-year-old guy, maybe, forward-thinking, not like, I'm sure, nothing like the Prime Minister of Bulgaria.
No, it's nothing like.
And you know, in Bulgaria, you have those notaries sitting in offices that look like they were taken out of the 1930s.
That's his office.
Yeah, sorry. But whatever you want to do here, you have to go to the notary, get that ridiculous stamp on every little thing. You have to come, especially here. Well, in other countries, you can do it, you know, in a digital way, like in Estonia, the e-residency. That's something that's working, and it's being adopted.
But you know, the moment...
Yes, if I may, Estonia is a good example. Malta is a great example.
Yeah.
Malta just adopted 3 laws, special legislation, creating a special digital innovation authority, whatever they call it. They're very much in advance, and their prime minister, who is not that old either, he wants even, they're in talks with Waves to tokenize government services, and it's amazing. It's great.
Malta is a great example, but also because it's a small government.
Yeah.
And I think
exactly.
we were all in agreement that as wonderful as it is, and I personally really like, I really was following very closely since the beginning all the Maltese process. It's still a small country within Europe, and until governments like France or Germany, or okay, the UK to a certain extent until Brexit, don't do something really progressive, what Malta and Estonia and Lithuania are doing is fantastic, but it's going to remain local.
You know,
But
I
in
think
France-
they're making the roadmap for the bigger governments to come, and then they will say, hey,
Yeah,
that
then
was,
just take it
you
away.
guys, you go back in the room now, that's it, done. It's Germany,
No,
France, and UK.
But I think I call it a sheep economy because Malta and Gibraltar and places like that, Isle of Man, you know, in the past they used to depend on their small economies. So they used to depend on things like cattle, milk production, you know, and now they did gaming,
Casinos.
now they're going into blockchain. So they are much more prone to generating new profit sources than big governments are because they need it. Now in France, you have the AMF that they came up with a new regulation, but in my eyes, it's really ridiculous because basically it says you can choose whether to be regulated or not, and if you choose not to, just put a disclaimer and say you're not regulated. Now,
Well, and also don't move out of France because you can't do anything with that.
And I don't know, French banks, you know, they're pretty, sorry.
Please continue.
Oh, I'm sorry,
After you
French
finish.
accent.
After you finish, sorry.
So I think this is an example for a big country that is going to adopt new regulation, but I don't think that's the kind of regulation that would promote the blockchain industry or that would actually properly regulate the crypto market.
Okay, so what about the guys who are actually still holding utility tokens, or they wanted to do the utility tokens? Where do we go from there? What are your advices? Like, those guys are coming to you, hey, look, we raised so much money, but it was a utility token now. Under certain circumstances, they raised, I know a particular case, I won't name the name, but they raised 25 million, and then they had to give 18 million back to certain investors, and then they only have 7 million left now.
Develop your product first, then issue a token. Have at least an MVP, at least something to show for. Don't try to ask for...
No, look, that's MVP and all of that. That's the general trend in 2018. Now we can't raise money without an MVP, without a partnerships, without a lot of things.
That's the rational way.
But if I have raised money already as a utility token, I have 20 to 30 or 50 million sitting in my bank. What are the threats?
AML. You probably didn't do it. And moving that money through traditional banks, which unfortunately they might need.
Okay, so let's say AML is all good. Okay, so AML is all right. So all these investors are accredited investors. That's fine. But if the government starts to say there is no utility token, we're going to ban utility tokens altogether, So what does that mean for
I
us
actually
now?
don't think that will happen. On the contrary, the governments have been actually saying there are utility projects, utility tokens. However, most of them seem like a security. But I don't see. I really cannot see why governments will be banning utility tokens.
I agree.
If it does, if it happens, Omourtag, any view, like what they're going to do? Do they have to give money back to the investors, or are they going to shift the entire project in a way where they're going to say, yeah, okay, look, like what would be the way out of it?
The only way to close down is to burn the tokens. So you burn the tokens back with the funds you've got against the tokens issued.
I think that would make it even worse.
It would make it worse, but
No.
if they're banned, there is no other option.
I think, and I would like to say something, that I think that we're all very focused on the ICO, the token issuance, the token generation event. Many crypto startups don't have a viable business model for the afterlife, for what happens after they get the money. And I think that to protect yourself in a legal way and regulatory way, you have to have a viable business model, you have to be transparent, you have to let your investors know periodically what you're doing with the money you've already raised. That's the most important thing when it comes to
I think the panel earlier discussed about that, the projects like Filecoin, Bankera, they're sitting a lot of money and then they still haven't done anything at all.
Yeah.
Literally nothing.
I think that's even worse than...
Okay, let's move on to the recent
Can I jump in the conversation?
announcement, which was...
I think we have a question.
Sorry, someone wanted to?
Yeah. So I'm George Jesus. I'm an attorney at law, and I want to answer your question, how is it going in terms of the trend lately? So what I'm seeing from my clients is that they are going more and more for security tokens. Even in Bulgaria, some very serious companies are going for security tokens, and they're mainly looking at Switzerland.
Yeah, it's
Basically, Switzerland's very convenient.
Yeah.
They have only one problem. It is that the uncertificated securities there are not easily transferable. They need to be transferred in writing. So they need to solve only this problem, and they will have no competition whatsoever. Neither Malta nor Estonia can go against Switzerland in terms of everyone would invest there because they protect. Sorry?
Are you based in Switzerland?
Sorry.
Are you based in Switzerland?
No, we have partners there, so we work
So there's
with them.
no conflict
No
of
free
interest, just for
publicity.
the record. There's no conflict of interest.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Switzerland. Otherwise, the other approach, Switzerland actually had really good guidelines from FINMA recently. I think it was released in March. February, yeah, end of February. So, yeah, they obviously recognize that there are utility tokens, and they define pretty well what utility tokens are. On the other hand, they have payment tokens as well, which are still not regulated.
I don't agree that they defined it really
sorry?
well. I disagree with you that they defined it really well, because they left a lot of open loopholes in how exactly you define a utility token, which is hybrid. A lot of your tokens today are
What is
hybrid.
a hybrid token? Because this is, I'm hearing a lot.
So a hybrid
right?
token is a token that combines characteristics of, it could be, for example, it could be a token that is a stable coin, but which is also used as a payment token within a platform, or it could be a security token which is backed by assets, but is also used as a payment token within a platform that the company is developing, or it could have characteristics of utility, payment, security, or...
So it's a combination of...
Basically, the utilities at the very beginning, access and returns, which generated a huge confusion among regulators.
So would that not be the viable solution for some of the Swiss funds or some of the other funds that are out there that you can just go and then tell them that, look, we have a hybrid token, it has some characteristics of utility, some
No,
characteristics
but you
of
still have to
SEO.
be regulated.
It's fantastic, but it's not regulated.
Yeah.
I think, and that's, I've been a personal
Nothing
belief.
is regulated.
I've been a personal belief that is one of the reasons why these should not be fit into the actual regulation, because these kind of tokens exist, and those kind of assets didn't exist before. And the regulation that exists right now is targeting either consumers or payment or securities in the traditional sense of it, but these tokens are combining different rights, and that should be a reason by itself to try to rethink where the regulation should go.
Okay,
Even tokenized assets, I just want to say something important. When you talk about tokenized assets, you have all sorts of ways to have a part in the asset, right? So you can either get dividends out of the asset performance, which resembles a derivative, or you can have actual ownership rights in the underlying asset. The ownership could be joint, it could be divided. There are so many ways to do it today that tokens are enabling so many ways to tokenize assets and to give token holders a part of the ownership or a part of the rights. So even that, within that category, there are so many variations. And
okay, so please be brief and to the direct, to the entire panel. Who should do the utility token, starting from you, Omourtag, in your opinion, and who should do the STO token? What specific criteria?
Well, that's a good question. What should be the specific criteria?
If you don't want to give anything back, if you're purely accessed and you're not giving anything back to the community that is backing you, do utility. But if you're trying to do something within the regulatory framework as it is right now, if you're trying to give something back within the network you're building, either rights or anything, payment, anything, then you should be safer into the security. Just how it is right now.
I also think that it depends a lot on the development stage of your product platform, and I also think that if you're a traditional company going into blockchain, that really prepares the ground for you to sell a utility token if if you're compatible with the criteria.
Please.
Yeah, no, to ask, when you say community, you mean community of investors, not community of users?
Both. Because when you have utility tokens that are granting access, at the very beginning, the users were the
Users
ones
are not accredited investors, though.
Yes, but that's the point. If you're not thinking about giving anything back, then go for security tokens. In the current regulation, is the only way you can go. And yes, sorry, you cannot have
you said the opposite, actually. You said if you're...
No, if you're a utility and you're thinking about not giving anything back, you can do your utility.
But what do you mean get anything back?
Dividends.
Okay.
Yes, any participation into any right of future profits, with the voting I will be careful because even the voting is part of what a right into a traditional security is as well, so you should go for securities just as it is right now. And yes, indeed, you will have the problem that normal users are not accredited investors.
Okay.
But right now...
I think that if you can compare your token to shoes, then you should do utility, right? Because what are shoes? They're something that you buy, you can put them on the same moment you can use them. If you're doing that and you're not giving back anything, any right that could infer to being a security, then you would probably be more compatible to the utility route.
Okay, so are you...
Yeah, I also want to go back to the hybrid question, because you mentioned hybrid should be... It was based on
combined characteristics of different categories.
Yeah, but the way I explain it to our clients and the way I've been seeing it in the space of fundraising, I've seen it more of a hybrid cases mixing an IPO, so a VC, so the way funds are being raised in the IPO space, at the same time also using the utility side. The utility, you use it as a bonus, a bounty, an airdrop. So you're giving it back as a bonus for people to do something in the community, whereas the VC side, which is the STO, is you're giving people dividends and you're getting your bigger investors, your more credit investors.
I mean, definitely, I see a lot of cases like that.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of cases where today the token is a security token, but in a year it's going to turn into a utility token, right?
Okay. I promise you guys that I wasn't gonna keep you longer than I want, so we're just gonna move to the last bit of this conversation. I'm gonna bring Robert here really into this one. This is again going back to the original topic of regulation, and my man Sterling, he started this morning the definition of money. We sat yesterday at the hotel, very beautiful hotel. Thank you for arranging that hotel for us. And we were discussing the very aspect of the definition of money. I think the definition of money also needs to be redefined. Why? Because loyalty points have existed far long time now, and then you can go and use them to book your tickets, to do anything, buy your shoes, clothes, and whatever you want, right? Now, the recent comments by Jean-Claude Juncker, he's saying that, okay, look, the protectionism and everything else has brought this situation to a level where euro should act as a reserve currency. So the dominance of the greenback, the dollar index, would eliminate from there onwards. This opens up the room for the cryptocurrency acceptance as a benchmark currency. I don't know whether Bitcoin Cash, whether Bitcoin or whatever it is, but there is a possibility. So what are your thoughts about in this landscape of freedom?
So I have actually, in my previous life as a lawyer, done a lot of work with the central banks in relation to how they might move on to a digital platform, because you can't call a central bank issued cryptocurrency a cryptocurrency. It's just a digital form of their own currency. But equally, you can't move outside your own territory very easily because you haven't got a means of transfer, because you've got, say you've got 300 currencies, so you've got 300 times 300 abilities to merge in, and the only way you could actually ever make central bank digital currencies work is if you have a central digital currency that they can all transfer through. Like
okay, so you think that the only central digital currency would be a benchmark currency, because that's the same as a fiat currency. Then it's not.
It isn't. It isn't.
Not
what I'm saying is, something like Bitcoin could be the central default currency, because it would have to work for all digital currencies, both essentially what we call cryptocurrencies today and the digital currencies that a lot of the central banks are trying to push forward now on blockchain. This is what Tether's tried to do, this is what a lot of the stable coins have tried to do. But there still isn't.
They don't believe in banks. I sat with Roger Val and I sat with McAfee. You should read the article. They do not believe in it. They said, we do not want them even close to us. No. That's it.
Because of the mass corruption in the global banking system, which we all know about. But that's why you created a Bitcoin in the first place and other cryptocurrencies, because you didn't want the governments and you didn't want the banks to interfere in something that was effectively financial freedom, which is what this panel is about. How you can create pure financial freedom when you've got this ongoing push on anti-money laundering, anti-terrorist financing. And this is what we had our discussion about in the room over there. All those laws and all those regulations that are coming in around the world are really just a smokescreen to enable the citizens of those countries to feel safer that they're not going to have terrorist attacks. Because at the end of the day, it's the governments and the banks that are doing all the money laundering and the terrorist financing, because they're the ones that can do it. If all the banks in the world had to run on a blockchain and it was a typical transparent blockchain, you'd see where they're moving their money. The reason you can't see it is because it's not on a blockchain.
But they already factor in, you see. When I take a money off you, I already know this is going to be my fine, because one way or the other, they will find out that I've done something wrong, and we've seen that trend in the banks.
You look at the size of the compliance departments in banks, it's like 4 or 5 times the size of the legal departments now. And is there any less money laundering or criminal or terrorist financing going on? No.
I remember Bobby Lee saying
correlation between the two ever. That they've never been able to show terrorist financing has gone down because you've increased the amount of money laundering laws.
Yeah, I remember Bobby Lee saying that, imagine banks investing all that money to actually catch the criminals rather than having the compliance. But if you are a banker, and if you're a central banker or coming from that, you will have a very different mentality altogether. You're not going to agree with this one. Okay.
I wouldn't blame banks. I think the biggest challenges the crypto market faces today is it's not interoperable, it's not scalable yet, and there's no monetary logic behind the currencies.
Of course there's a monetary logic.
No, there's not.
They can use Amazon. You can buy cars, you can buy houses in Dubai.
No.
I can buy Ireland by using cryptocurrency.
By monetary logic, I mean a system that stabilizes the currency and makes sure that the way the currency is the price, the fluctuations, they're
and that works kept in Venezuela,
check. But it's not happening because there's no there's no central bank, right? We don't have any central bank.
The central banks
backing
don't always
crypto.
work.
No,
So
no,
it all boils down to the fact that we need
I'm,
someone.
I'm just giving it as an example, but I'm saying without monetary logic, we can all continue to play in our little sandbox. We're not going to see mass adoption unless it becomes interoperable, scalable, and monetarily logical.
But that's why we create, there is an ICO going around now for financial services blockchain, where they're creating a global standard for blockchain.
I don't think that's
all
enough.
the governments of the world are putting teams in to do that.
Okay, if that happens,
You need global interoperability, obviously.
Do you think it starts from you guys, like from the legal side, to have a global law?
I think we have a big role in it. Because we can bridge the gap between the entrepreneurs and the visionaries and between the regulators, and we can speak both languages, I think that we could play a very important role in helping regulators adopt more, realistic approaches towards.
I love your enthusiasm that we speak both languages, but I will think that most of the lawyers do not speak the language of the entrepreneur. Okay. We are better suited to understand the regulators because our training takes us to that. And the few ones that actually can understand the entrepreneur, then they will rock. So yes, it has to start by getting better trained lawyers, but also overall the entire blockchain community to also come together in certain consensus, which doesn't happen yet.
Okay, thank you. Please put your hands together for the wonderful panel, and I really applaud and thank you guys for staying for this long. It's been wonderful being here. Thank you so much.